G'day legends and happy Friday. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and that you've had a fantastic week. Now, if you were surprised to hear that it is a Friday, that is okay. I know everybody between Christmas and New Year period is basically living in a bit of a dream, not knowing what is going on, full of sugar and carbs and sweets. But I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Now, I hope the video goes more smoothly than it did yesterday. I had one of my applications fail. Well, the video is still processing somewhere in the background, so I apologize for that. Trust me, no one is more disappointed than I when something like that occurs, because I go to a hell of a lot of effort to release a 30, 40, 50-minute video every day, that I really care about things being correct and up to the standard that you should expect. Even if you don't, you should expect it, because, again, this is my job. I don't want to go half-assed. Now, legends, of course, there is a lot to go over, but I just want to add a little asterisk here. Look, this period, I am incredibly lucky and privileged to be spending this time with my family, and it's an enjoyable time during Christmas, New Year's, but I do understand that a lot of people can find this the most lonely time of the year. So, look, reach out to a friend, reach out to family, reach out to professionals if you need any of that. And look, if you just want to vent, feel free just to type it out in an email and send it to me. It'll be always anonymous. It can be confidential. Anything that you want, please just go for it. I know how difficult it can be. Now, legends, we have got, of course, a lot to go over. We will look at the maps. We'll compare different maps. We'll see where things are moving. And I want to look at a geolocation showing where a very important road has been cut off. We need to talk a lot about aircraft. Of course, we'll talk about the civilian airliner that has gone down, killing dozens. And now that it's coming out, people saying 95% sure that it was Russian air defense. Now, what I will say in this is I believe that is highly likely the case. But the full investigation has not gone through yet to get confirmations on exactly that. So we'll continue tracking this story. 95% sure, yes, as we spoke about yesterday, but just wait out on conclusions until that has finished. We need to talk about claims of an F-16 being shot down. We also need to look at what China has released, their 6th generation aircraft. Not one of them, but actually 2 different aircraft seen today. There's a lot of claims around this. Again, everything around this is going to be highly, highly classified as to what the capabilities are, everything. Things from the 60s and 70s are still classified around aircraft. So again, the claims of what it is and the counterclaims that it can't do that, both sides don't have the classification to speak on the actual truth of that. Maybe it'll come out through that War Thunder game or whatever it is. But we will look at that. I want to talk about strikes and some weapons that I found interesting, and we'll also talk about North Korea and claims of a captured prisoner of war. So let's talk about some strikes right in the beginning here. Now, again, I show you because I believe they're incredibly important. I believe number one priority for Ukraine right now should be manpower, but secondly, development of fiber optic controlled drones. Let's say that 10% of Russian drones at the moment, FPV drones, are fiber optic. It is making up, I believe, from what I see, 80% of successful strikes at the moment. And it's definitely not the majority of drones in the air, meaning that these have a much, much higher, from what I'm seeing, kill rate. Now, we have seen 1 or 2 fiber optic Ukrainian drones, but not en masse yet. And I believe that should be a very, very high priority, much higher than a system that may look good in a photograph, but like an F-16 won't actually be flying over Moscow like some people have released. So let's have a look at some of these Russian fiber optics, and this tells us a couple of things. So this video came out today of a fiber optic drone targeting a Ukrainian Humvee with extra armor put on it here and cages, cope cages, so to speak. But if I was entering war, I would put one of these, it's basically driving and then starts reversing. But what you can see on here is one of these will be radio and one will be electronic warfare, or they can be some other different bits and pieces too to do with mines, but don't worry about that. But definitely some EW capacity on this vehicle. And again, this is why these drones have such a high kill rate, is EW does nothing to them. So it can strike these targets that have the EW and then pick off other targets around that. And it's exactly what we are seeing. Then we see the rear of this Humvee. This is the best looking variant of the Humvee with the slant back, but you can see these systems on top of here, to my eye, looking like both electronic warfare, as I don't recognize if one of them is a radio system. That doesn't look like that to me from my experience working around EW and being a low level, but very low level EW electronic warfare operator. That is what it looks like to myself. So those are having a big effect. And you can also see how muddy the ground is. That's why I show you this footage here. This is more strikes from fiber optic controlled drones. And what you can see is then this ute, this truck, whatever you want to call it. This is a ute, not a truck, guys. A truck is what pulls a trailer, not this. This ute getting struck by a Russian fiber optic controlled drone going in. But this is around the Pokrovsk area. And I show this for a few reasons. Remember, I'm not interested in footage of just people getting hit, hurt, and killed. I'm interested in what tells a story and adds to our idea of the battlefield of what's going on. You can just see how muddy this area is. Of course, this vehicle here now bogged and struck. Now we can see this drone here working in less than ideal conditions, of course, with massive fog or smoke. These can have a large impact on radio signals, as well as just visibility if you've got poor radio signal. And this FPV drone then targeting this said to be supply van here, and then further this drone, another fiber optic coming up on a 50 cal machine gun here with rust on the barrel and potentially a suppressor. No, that's just the end of the barrel there. Sorry, it looked a bit funny on that angle, and it looks to be out that window. Abandoned rounds still on it, and the drone striking. So again, those FPV fiber optics currently on the battlefield. What is making the biggest shift? I believe those, similar to last month, the month before, being, say, the FABs. And as this rolls forward, it's going to be very hard to counter these with anything other than a lethal system like a shotgun, rather than the solution of electronic warfare against drones. Again, watch this space. I believe everyone enabling Ukraine to fight, those private companies will be looking that way, because there is huge monetary incentive to get that working and get it into the battlefield for testing on those weapons too. Anyone who says Russia is testing Oreshnik weapon in Ukraine, yes, that is true. But every military company in the world is trying to send in weapons or get contracts to send in weapons to Ukraine to try that to sell more externally. Absolutely. We've seen some go pick up great, like Bradley's. We've seen other go and fail as well. Like, what's the drone in a can or the bomb in a can thing? Didn't work, too expensive. Anyway, let's have a look at this. This is from Fighter Bomber, and many other Russian pages are saying this today. But again, it's unconfirmed. Anything to do with fighter aircraft, whether it's an F-series jet or a Su-series jet or a T-series jet, unless there is clear evidence of it, there's so many claims, it's bullshit. But they are talking about unconfirmed data, unconfirmed target shot down, unconfirmed troops, unconfirmed by what, spread maximum repost. I hope everyone gets confirmed payments. They're saying the payments around, remember, there was payments towards Russian military members if they could shoot down an F-16. I'm unsure if the Ukrainian Patriot battery could claim that money when they shot one down. I guess we will see. But again, wait for further evidence of any of this, because again, it's a very high target claim. Well, we need evidence for that. It's not pro one way or the other, or you're a propagandist. Apparently you're a propagandist when you ask for evidence of the 10 Su-34s shot down in 10 days, or the goes to Pyongyang or whatever on the front line. But let's talk about the maps first, as we did a bit of a rough job with it yesterday. So we'll just zoom out in here. And of course, we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kiev. The red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014. Of course, the red check shown on this map, ground that Russia is occupying within the last 24 hours. That said, I think the trustworthiness, the reliability of this map, I apologize if this isn't the fact, I do. But since what has occurred last week, it's just seeming like it's like, can I trust it? It was difficult with the contract signed with the MOD 6 months ago, 8 months ago. But now we've seen there's definitely influence and threats and whatever. It's hard to know. And the bottom line of Deep State is being questioned. Again, if there is an alternative that's reliable, whatever, on the pro-Ukraine side, I'll use that so I can do it with neutral or pro-Russian maps, even maybe Rybar or whatever too. But we have another neutral map of AMK mapping today that we'll be looking at as well. So before we get into what specifically is moving, we need to look at what is causing a lot of this to move. Greatly ignored, but absolutely manpower. And this is what a friend of mine has sent out. You pointed out that US are ready to receive and train Ukrainian soldiers, but Ukraine aren't sending them. I don't think they can. Ukraine can conscript and compel men to serve in the Ukrainian territory because Ukrainian martial law applies there. It does not apply on US soil. So the minute they'd gone through security, they could just run away and they would not be violating any US law. At most, the government might cancel their visas and try to deport them, but they could easily take a bus to any sanctuary city long before any of that could take place. Ukraine want to keep Ukrainian men in Ukraine, and as you pointed out, there's even a law for that. Sending them to the US by the thousands would defeat the purpose of that law. And again, like we have said, the people that were motivated to go and fight, patriotic about fighting on the front line, they've gone to the recruitment office, they've been recruited. At this point in time, literally grabbing guys off the street, out of cars, out of theatres. And he makes a good point here, and we have spoken about this when there was talk about being large en masse training in France, and then France turning around and going, why don't we run that training in Ukraine? And we said at that point of time, could that have been it too? Because once these guys in that 18 to 60 who can't leave the country, if they really don't want to fight, they've avoided this so far, what's stopping them just running outside of the base? And I know there are certain rules around the training being run throughout Europe. There are certain restrictions put on the Ukrainians training there. But of course, this does have a problem in the manpower paradox that Ukraine is in, not wanting to mobilise. But if they don't mobilise, then they'll lose everything. But if they do mobilise, they're saying, well, then we potential risking the next generation, therefore losing everything. This is the paradox here that I'm saying, well, you need to commit one way or the other. Sitting in limbo is the worst possible bloody decision. And we see this from a Ukrainian news outlet. Demobilisation in Ukraine is impossible now, rotation is needing. MP Alexander Fidienko stated that demobilisation is impossible due to the lack of military personnel. He emphasised the need to introduce a rotational system for military recreation. We know that there's no demobilisation, no rotation. That's why some people are not letting themselves be mobilised. That's why they're hiding. And what is annoying a hell of a lot of people on the front line. But he says here, given the situation as I said, it's impossible to approve demobilisation as of today. The rotation should be carried out. The soldiers who are on the front line really need to be given a break, morally, physically, emotionally. This is a normal practice. To demobilise, personally, I cannot understand how this can be done physically because we do not have enough soldiers. We do not have enough soldiers who can really hold the line, conduct some counter-offensive operations. That's why I don't know how to do demobilisation. And further, a member here in the Pokrovsk Kurakhove, so like the parliament has said, has previously stated that the rotational system for the military has not yet been fully implemented due to the escalation at the front and the international situation, and mass demobilisation in time of war is not in the interests of national security. So saying that because Russia has increased pressure at the front, we can't have any rotation demobilisation, but at the same time, because the international community is not giving enough arms, we can't mobilise enough either. My question is, which then is it? The Centre for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defence Council of the Pokrovsk Kurakhove Committee, National Security Defence, they have said about the existence of a draft law to lower the mobilisation age of the country, which is spread by the media. So they're denying that that actually exists. Many are saying that there is a draft law, but that they're saying that is disinformation spread online. I have heard rumours about this as well. But let's look furthermore on the map. So come down to a very interesting area, the Kherson. Of course, Kherson is spread between the left bank, Russian-controlled, right bank controlled by the Ukrainians, where in the green here you'll see where the Russians have been previously. And we have been reporting over the past week there's been a lot of attempts to get some level of foothold over here. And NOAA report says Russian forces have intensified shelling in the Kherson region and are trying to gain a foothold with then reconnaissance sabotage groups. All attempts to capture parts of the right bank of Kherson so far have been unsuccessful, according to the head of the Kherson Military Oblast administration. But I agree with the top comment here. They better not allow Russians to gain a foothold. Widening the front line even more is bad for Ukraine. So Russia widening the front line anywhere is bad for Ukraine being numerically inferior on their front line. They've just got less guys. And I believe if Russia could gain a foothold over here, this would be very, very large in a negotiation having ground on the other bank of the Dnieper River. Again, like I said, this was strategically and tactically, the biggest loss for the Russian forces was being pushed back across onto the left bank of of course, the Dnipro. So I'm not surprised to see this. We're seeing Fabs dropped. We saw 1,000 shells claimed to be fired the other night. Not surprised at all. But we come a fair way east of here. And of course, we have Kurakhove. We have then the Pokrovsk front. And you can see that there is red through Kurakhove itself. We showed you the geolocation confirming where the flag was right where my cursor is yesterday. Not surprised to see that. As well as to the north of Dalny, more ground being made around Zoroya. Suryak spoke about this yesterday. Zeleny, Pokrovsk, Shevchenko. We see many different areas here coming under Russian control. Now, the part that I did yesterday that you guys missed was I believe that Russia will try and get Udashny before any pushes on DRG elements move into Pokrovsk. So let's look at the distance on the closest areas here, about 5 kilometers. So drones will be flying into there, but I believe the front line will look something like this before we see more of a push on Pokrovsk itself, trying to capture where the train line is in here. Of course, a logistics element, but also cover of this train line, then forcing a lot of logistics onto other roads, but it'll be a lot closer for targeting at that point in time. So I believe the short-term goal here is Udashny, and that goes with where we're seeing the main amount of pressure added at the moment. Let's just move just to the west of here, and we have Rozliv. And have a look at this. This is then AMK mapping here. So this is not the easiest to see, but this area is right in here. You can see this paddock on then the diagonal coming through, and saying that a lot of this has been then taken by the Russian forces at this point in time, right sort of where my cursor is at the moment, that this area, these paddocks are coming under Russian control. And he says Russian forces made significant progress in the Andriivka direction over the past week and a half, saying that some of these are a week old, but there's been a 25.1 kilometer squares gained by the Russian forces in this area, right down around where my cursor is outlining at the moment. We'll wait and see where this moves in the coming days. And of course, further then to the west, we have Velika Novosilka, of course, a very, very important area. And we can see no movement on this map today, but let's have a look at a couple of geolocations. What we have been saying is there's 3 main roads, one through Rozdolny, one Novaya Koma, and the other one that's heading west to east. And let's have a look at this. I've got this geolocation here of where we see Ukrainian drones targeting Russian positions outside of even the grey zone on this map. Now, these Russian positions are getting hit very, very hard by the drones. I can't show you this footage. It'll be on the Telegram if you'd like to see. But the reason we bring this up, and it's from Ukrainian pages, this footage, the reason we bring this up is to show you that this road has been physically cut off at this point. Now, we see here AMK saying this is then the case, showing where that push-up was. Russian force advanced in the direction, physically cut the Huliapol road after coming small arms range of the road. Russian force expanding their zone of control west and protect the flank, where they take up new tree line positions. Russian infantry launched an assault across the road and seized positions there, gaining a foothold in the next tree line. Suggests that Russian force captured the remaining parts of the tree line in the east, saying 3.3 kilometer squares to the Russian forces in this area. And this is, of course, a very big problem at this point in time for the logistics in here. Will we see a withdrawal? Well, we don't know. We know that this bridge right here is down. This puts a hell of a lot of pressure on the troops inside of here. But let's look at what AMK says about this situation. Now, I showed you those roads. Now, the last 2 roads out of Velika Novosilka, so the one on the west and the one in the north, have come under control or fire control of Russian forces. Many would expect Ukraine to begin the process of withdrawing. Do not expect this to happen. They are going to fight for as long as physically possible here. It won't matter if the Russians are 10 kilometers or 1 kilometer away from closing the pocket. The armed forces of Ukraine will try to hold on, and it is absolutely seen recently that Ukraine wait to the very last second before pulling out, and we have seen soldiers then left behind and not be able to pull out from Avdiivka to Makariivka to Vuhledar. This is a very sensitive part of the front line for Ukraine. Just south of Velika Novosilka was one of the few areas where Ukraine made progress in their failed 2023 counteroffensive. We've been saying this is a sensitive area. Velika Novosilka was also the Vuhledar of westernmost Donetsk, as the Russians repeatedly failed to seize the town in 22 and 23. It is a stronghold and is very important to the Ukrainian command. Again, This will at some point probably become strategically unimportant. It's held for this long. It is a stronghold. There is command here. There's logistics here. This is very important. Look at Wuhledar that was said to be important. They're not important. And then look how far in the 10, 15 Ks it's moved in the months after that. The loss of Novosibirsk will also be a strategic win for Russia as the town lies at the intersection of multiple roads, making it an important logistical hub which Russia can and will exploit in the future to make gains into deep Dnipro Oblast and the west and rest of western Donetsk Oblast. Speaking of Dnipro Oblast, Novosibirsk is the gateway to the region with only a few villages in the way. Entering Dnipro Oblast opens up a new front in this war into a previously largely untouched region of Ukraine. All this, plus Ukraine's notorious track record of finding itself in dangerous salients, point towards another situation similar to that in Avdiivka or Kurakhove. I repeat, do not expect a Ukrainian withdrawal anytime soon. And I agree. I do not think we'll see a withdrawal out of here. But again, it is a very, very dangerous situation. And you can see the dotted line through here. Of course, this is the border of Dnipro Oblast. And now this is getting closer and closer. We go from here. We're talking 8 kilometers. How far is it from a point here? A bit closer, 7.3 kilometers, but moving up closer and closer every day to enter a whole new, previously basically untouched oblast. So wait and see how this goes in the coming weeks. Let's talk about North Korea. Let's talk about Kursk. No changes shown up on the maps in Kursk, but we see this image released today. South Korea's National Intelligence Service, the NIS, has to be a 3-letter word of the alphabet soup of agencies, or else it isn't an official one, confirmed that Ukraine captured a wounded North Korean soldier, making the first known instance of a North Korean combatant being seized. The soldier was reportedly captured by Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk region, as reported by Ukraine's military news outlets. South Korean have noted that 11,000 North Korean troops have been sent to Russia, with more expected. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also reported that over 3,000 North Korean casualties in the Kursk region, with 1,000 of those claimed to be killed. Now, many people have pointed out it looks like there is AZ, of course, notorious and infamous for the Russian forces, on this guy's beanie hat. Here, again, that's not beyond reasonable doubt of anything. It could be a cold night and he's found this and gone, hey, I'll put this bloody cap on. But it does call into question this image, as well as does the age. If people are saying these are young special forces deployed in here, this is an older, looking to be malnourished soldier. But on this, what I say is, although I believe it is highly likely that North Korean soldiers are fighting in Kursk, or at least operating North Korean artillery systems in Kursk, 3,000 killed or wounded, with one claimed POW and little other evidence, does raise questions. You've had 3,000 killed or wounded, claimed one POW, not much other evidence. That raises a hell of a lot of questions. You're saying they're coming in meat waves and you're mowing them down. There's going to be a hell of a lot more evidence than what we are seeing, as well as wounded guys who you recover off the battlefield. And especially when we add this to the calculation of the benefits for both Ukraine and South Korea, this brings more into question as why this may be being played up, because North Koreans here gave Ukraine the green light for long-range strategic strikes. Has that been a game changer for the war? No, we knew it wasn't going to be a game changer for the war, although it was talked up out the fucking roof. But South Korea, this could be a big change in the war. There's no such thing as game changers except for nuclear weapons, but South Korea has a massive defense industry. What does something like this do? Well, it can open up the floodgates for South Korea to pump in massive amounts of military hardware funded by external countries who can't keep up with the demand, Europe and in America. So therefore, a shitload of money going to South Korea. I know the constitution prevents it, but that shit can be changed. So massive incentive for South Korea for this to be true, and massive incentive for Ukraine for this to be true, because they, of course, want to receive those South Korean systems. So this is why the threshold for evidence is so high, because the amount North Koreans benefits Russia is fucking zero. Realistically, it's very little. Shells and guns, yeah, a lot. Troops don't speak English, don't speak Russian, don't have an experience, questionable training probably. There's not much benefit here, but the benefit for Ukraine of these coming in is way more than it is for Russia. That's why my threshold for evidence is incredibly high. The exact same as if German or French soldiers entered on the Ukrainian side and Russians were saying they're here, the threshold would be incredibly bloody high for that. It's beyond. Plenty of soldiers have been captured or killed with patches on, but that's just a patch. It's not beyond reasonable doubt of things. So that's why I'm sitting there. Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Kyiv doesn't intend to send any captured North Korean soldiers to South Korea, even though Seoul regards them as Republic of Korea citizens, but rather exchange them for Ukrainian prisoners of war held in Russia. This may be a sticking point, because if you leave North Korea, if you can get out, if you can defect out, South Korea will take you on it. They see you as one of their citizens, just with a radical state on their north. This could be a problem, because if these are seen as South Korean citizens and seek then a different life there and status, this could be a sticking point as well. Again, we don't know. Such combatants could face an uncertain future if sent back to North Korea, where they'd be feted as war heroes, but also interrogated, where they divulge sensitive intelligence while captured. They talk about this, that South Korean stand to gain valuable information about the Russian army and North Korean forces. In my opinion, North Korean soldiers will not be given any mid or high level intel. Soldiers in general are not given that. NCOs from regular forces are not given that. Other than maybe some locations of things, it's not going to be a huge divulge of this. And yeah, it's not going to be. The Russians are not going to be giving a North Korean soldier, this is where our EW systems are, how they work. It's possible that the South Korean military intelligence officials will support Kyiv's interrogation of North Korean PWs. There's been a lot of speculation that there are South Korean interrogators in Ukraine for captured POWs. Kyiv previously launched a campaign titled "I Want to Live" that called on DPRK's troops fighting in Russia to surrender, promising food and safety, although there has been no official confirmation of any desertion cases, except if you're on TikTok following that bloke with the curly hair who says there's been tens or hundreds of defectors for months and months. I really wish people's audiences would hold bloggers making claims to fucking account. Hold people to accountability. People make a shitload of money off doing this. Hold them to bloody account. Now, let's talk about aircraft. Now, this is the crash, of course, of that Embraer plane in Kazakhstan. Horrible, horrible thing that has occurred. Aviation experts said on Thursday that Russian air defense fire was probably responsible for the Azerbaijani plane crash the day before that killed 38 people and left 29 survivors injured. Remember, the pilots did absolutely everything they could. The plane went down about 3 kilometres from Aktau. Phone footage taken on appears to show the aircraft making a steep descent before smashing into the ground. I'm sure you can go and find the footage. Other footage shows part of the fuselage ripped away from the wings and the rest of the aircraft laying upside down in the grass. So the front fully exploded. The rear seemed to be somewhat intact, sort of snapped in the middle as it hit incredibly hard. I'm so glad people survived this. Watching the footage, I can't believe anyone bloody survived this crash. Now, Russia's Civil Aviation Authority said preliminary information indicated that the pilots diverted to Aktau after a bird strike led to an emergency on board. As the official crash investigation started, some experts alleged that holes in the plane's tail section could indicate that it could have come under fire from Russia's air defense system, fending off a Ukrainian drone attack. That is what we have said yesterday. And this then went out over the Caspian Sea. I'll show you this. So it was meant to go, then this Azerbaijan, this is, of course, Russia, Grozny in here, that's said to be under a Ukrainian drone attack at the time, and they've then rerouted to Aktau here across the Caspian Sea, approximately 430 kilometres, a hell of a long way. Now, some are claiming that Russia was trying to have this go down in the Caspian Sea, of course, sinking to the bottom here, and the evidence never coming out of this being hit. At this point in time, that isn't confirmed whatsoever, that it is just speculation that people are saying, trying to cover this up. People are also saying, could this be a false flag? They've shot down a civilian airliner during a Ukrainian drone attack to discredit the Ukrainian forces and long-range drone attacks. Look, I've been saying for a long time, look out for false flags. That said, this just doesn't seem to benefit one side or the other massively here. So no, I'm saying that this is unlikely, in my opinion, compared to events that we could see. Remember, it would pin one side massively on this, where people are putting blame sort of on both here for this. I believe most likely this is just a mistake of air defense, or a mistake of the technical ability of potentially a Panzer system, that this is in the air striking targets and it's gone rerouted to the plane, or a radar operator has targeted this plane. Some of the best radar operators in the world, USS Gettysburg, shot down one of their own F-18s, landing with friend or foe systems on board. This isn't impossible. I believe if we were to add Occam's razor theory of this is what is most likely is probably true, it's probably, in my opinion, a mistaken plane going down here. That is what I'm seeing. But again, any evidence, and when the full report comes out, I'll be very interested to see. Ukrainian drones have previously attacked Grozny, the provincial capital of Russia's Republic of Chechnya, and other regions of the country's North Caucasus. An official in Chechnya said that another drone attack on the region was fended off on Wednesday. So surface-to-air missile attack that Mark Z of Ob's group. Fragments of the crashed plane indicated it was almost certainly hit by a surface-to-air missile. Much more to investigate, but we at high level would put the probability of it being a SAM attack on the aircraft being well into the 90 to 99% bracket, as seen by those images we have seen of the holes ripping through. From Osprey Flight Solutions, the Azerbaijani Airlines was likely shot down by Russian missile air defense system. The incident was a stark reminder of why we do what we do. It's painful to know that despite our efforts, lives were lost in a way that could have been avoided. This guy here, an independent Russian military expert, says the damage is compatible with shrapnel from a small surface-to-air missile, such as the Panzer S-1 air defense systems. It looks like the tail section of the plane was damaged by some missile fragments. We reported on this yesterday. We showed you the images. Mr. Martinev added that it remained unclear why the pilots decided to fly hundreds of kilometres east of the Caspian Sea instead of trying to land at a closer airport in Russia after the plane was hit. We'll go over what Fighter Bomber has said about this. People also bringing up about GPS being jammed. That said, GPS is jammed in a lot of areas, including all over Israel as well. That's going to become relevant. Perhaps some of the plane systems kept working for some time and the crew believed that they could make it and land normally. Azerbaijani News said that it was fired upon by a Russian Panzer. It's questioned why Russian authorities failed to close the airport despite the apparent drone raid in the area. And this is why I've said that Lviv Airport should not open, and why I'm critical of Tel Aviv Airport being wrong as well. Wrong to make hypothesis. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters it would be wrong to make a hypothesis before investigators make their verdicts. Kazakhstan's parliamentary speaker also warned against rushing to conclusions based on pictures of the plane fragments, describing allegations of air defense was unfounded and unethical. Other officials in Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan have similarly avoided comment on possible cause of the crash, saying it would be up to the investigation to determine. It's not the first time in this area of the world, and not even the second time, that airliners have been hit by air defense. Russia's emergencies ministry on Thursday flew 9 Russian survivors to Moscow for treatment. And I say about GPS and my criticism of planes flying in active zones of war, whether in Ukraine, whether in Russia, whether in Israel, whether in Lebanon, wherever. Then this was on today. Israel's flagship carrier El Al, who still owes me for losing my fucking bag, says it has suspended all of its flights from Tel Aviv to Moscow for this week, citing developments in Russia's airspace. Over the next week, a renewed assessment of the situation will be carried out to decide whether the route will be resumed. So not in Israel, but into Russia, into Moscow. El Al planes do have anti-missile systems aboard them. It's one of the reasons they can continue, and what they cite as for the safety. Again, I still question it because it would be horrible, as this is horrible for something to go down. A fighter bomber, of course, a Russian bomber pilot, ex-bomb pilot, has spoken about this. I'll answer the question asked most. An aerodrome cannot prohibit landing of an aircraft due to emergency landing. So they can't say you can't land here if it's an emergency, you can go down. The decision to land is made by the crew commander as he decides which alternate airfield to go to. So by the captain on board who is doing this. No commanders are higher than on the planet. So if something's wrong, you're the plane in emergency, you have the right of way to do whatever you want, and you are making the decisions. The Chechens have no air defense. All air defenses is subordinated to the Russian Ministry of Defense. GPS has now been disabled, or rather jammed, by Russian and Ukrainian electronic warfare systems over the entire south of Russia for 3 years now. During moments of aviation missile danger, the power of electronic warfare increases. So saying, yes, this is jammed, but if there was a drone attack, we then dial it up and it could be jammed more. GPS is of the means of correction, not navigation. Airplanes have been flying without it for 100 years, and this is true. GPS is handy on those planes, but pilots do learn to fly dark as well. The GPS, if you're in the north of Israel, it puts you at the international airport in Lebanon, in Beirut. This is what I have been very critical of, because if my Google phone shows that I'm in that airport, what is stopping a H-Guys drone coming in and then going, oh, this is where I actually am, and going back and hitting the international airport? I've spoken about it before. I don't know. The plane began to lose control over the sea. This is confirmed on video of the passengers. Up to this point, is controlled normally. Most likely it was a reason for the commander's decision to proceed to act out. So he may have been avoiding Chechnya, George, because there's strike there, already going, and then has been hit. The cover signal been given by air defence authorities, exceptional cases, and means immediate landing or removal of aircraft from the corresponding area. There's no talk of any ban on landing. So from his end, he's saying we haven't heard anything about this. The pilots, as I understand, are citizens of Azerbaijan. They will be awarded the authorities of Azerbaijan, but if the country awards them posthumously, I can never pronounce this, with the highest possible award of foreigners, that would be right. And I agree they should. They did everything they could. Let those who are supposed to name the cause of the catastrophe, and the messenger who brings the bad news is killed. So we will see what becomes of this and see what that actually comes out. But no matter the findings on this, people have already made up their mind. Now, China, 6th generation fighters. They look bloody cool as far as what we know what they can do. Well, we don't really bloody know, but there's two different ones. So the footage you've probably seen is of this, of the White Emperor. Now, this is a Chinese J-20, which is a 4++ or Gen 5 claimed aircraft, similar to your sort of F-35, F-22, Su-57 styling that you see, and then this sort of flying wing aircraft here being claimed as the White Emperor. We get an all right view of it, but it does look like it does have 3 engines. And what we are hearing is this is right on the edge of space at supersonic, potentially hypersonic speeds. We get a little bit better footage here. We can see again this sort of delta wing, and you can see whether if it is 3 engines or maybe it's got a parachute between them, like some of the, say, Russian aircraft here, as well with this J-20. So that is the White Emperor plane. But then there's a second one. Now, many are saying it's just one. No, this is different from, you can see the shape of the body. It's not as much of a triangle Dorito plane. So this is a second claimed, then, next generation fighter bomber plane here. This does look like 2 engines. You can see the wings and the front different. Now, what we don't know is we don't know if this is manned or unmanned. We don't know the capacity. We don't know the capability. We know very, very little at this point. Let's look at what Fighter Bomber has said again. Meanwhile, in the atmosphere of the strictest secrecy, and the Chinese showed the entire planet flight of their newest aircraft, which the media called the 6th generation fighter, and the secrecy in China is unbelievable. But there is similarity with the model that the Chinese presented at the last exhibition as their 6th generation fighter, this one right here. From the video, it can be concluded that something was definitely being made. It's unclear whether it is unmanned or not, but it's undoubtedly very interesting. What I can say, the Chinese are great. This post is written by the Order of Fleury. This is a New Year's gift to you. So, again, we don't know, but it looks very, very cool. But let's open up this one right here. Now, what I will say, people only question China's industrial capacity when it comes to military equipment, not regular equipment or technology. No one's questioning BYD cars. They're not questioning all the Amazon stuff you get, or your phones or computers. They're not measuring any of that. But when it's military equipment, everyone's like, it must suck. People need to accept China is a very, very close to the US in military and economic power. And in some aspects is definitely ahead, and some is likely ahead. It is definitely ahead in ships, shells, and men, at least numbers, and likely ahead or potentially ahead in some other areas like AI. Now, another factor on this here. People go, well, why is Gen 5 aircraft, the J-20, the Su-57, the F-35, why do they all look similar? And then the Gen 6 aircraft, this looks very similar to America's NGAD. And what someone said to me is, well, look, these are being made with machine AI learning. They're developed that way to be the most efficient possible, given the limitations of materials at the moment. And what he said to me is, these will all end up looking very, very similar. If you're looking for the most efficient shape with the materials available, within building aspects and what you need for this, they're all going to look very similar. It's not that one's copying the other, although we do know China is notorious for making analogues. It's not that it's going to be a copy. It's that they're all going to look the same because, well, realistically, a Ferrari and a Lamborghini, a mid-engine car, rear-engine car, they all look the same because it is the best shape for the requirements they are. Yes, there's little changes, but does that make sense? And as machine learning AI improves, it's probably going to look more and more similar as the best possible shape, if you forget any aesthetics, is found. Key point summary, China's White Emperor is a 6th generation fighter mock-up designed for function. So this was the mock-up here for a space air platform. capabilities for supersonic speeds near the atmosphere's edge. And as, of course, the air gets thinner and thinner, you can go faster and faster. But again, it is unsure. We are unsure if these are manned or not, or maybe can be manned or can go unmanned too. We know Navy ships are going this way. Can be manned or doesn't need to be. Explain wing and stealth-inspired features, deviate from earlier Chinese renderings that mimicked US designs like NGAD. However, questions persist about its feasibility, including thermal management, propulsion, and radar stealth. Propulsion is one big thing that we know Russia has an advantage over China on for high efficiency jet, ramjet style and rocket engines. We know there is, as far as we're aware, Russia does have the upper hand there on China, and we've been mentioning this now for months, that there could be some exchange of information, money or shells or anything for that information too. Another big one to look for is Russia's nuclear propulsion, as well as submarine technology and ability to availability, I should say, more of titanium for Chinese submarines. I think in the future that will become a big piece too. China's White Emperor fighter, can it truly rule space and air? It would seem highly questionable given how difficult it is to operate in space with manned and even unmanned vehicles and drones able to quickly transit and maintain stealth from one radar aperture to another. Different radars have different systems. Something that F-117 might be blind to in Serbia, maybe it's not, and it gets shot down. Again, people have said, oh shit, something I didn't hit on is it Fighter Bomber who asked why a fighter, why 6th and not 5++ or 8th generation? They did not explain why it fits in that gen. Now, I've actually heard many people say Gen 5 is a bit of a pointless aircraft, but very expensive for a long time. We're talking things like F-35, whatever, because the countries that are warring at the moment, you don't need that. They're pointless at the current wars. A Gen 3 or Gen 4 can do the same job in countries with limited or no air defense when linked with things like AWACS, but the tech isn't good enough yet for unmanned high-end Gen 6, so it needs a gap fill for a couple of decades. Between 4 and 6 is a large step, but it needs to fill in that gap, and China may have gone 4++ and then gone Gen 6. There's been question around like the F-35, the billions, trillions, I think it could be in the trillions, but it's these in the hundreds of billions poured into that program, that it's going to actually have a very short life compared to the programs previously, because Gen 6 is going to come over and make it obsolete very, very quickly. The future of the jet will be able to travel at supersonic speeds near the boundary of Earth's atmospheres, according to the interesting essay from the National Interest. Again, it's so hard to know what is bullshit and what is true in this, but do not underestimate China's industrial capacity. I think people still think it's the China people that remember in the 1990s, not what they've become now, economically, militarily, politically, every aspect very, very powerful. Just because you don't agree with human rights abuses, the way China operate around the world, just because you don't agree with that, and I don't agree with this happening, but that doesn't then mean, because you want the military capacity to be bad, doesn't mean then that's true. Your emotions versus reality has no effect on that. China is a massive, massive power. And on the trajectories every country is going, China is, at this point in time, unless there's changes and the population crisis for China really can hit hard, but is on path to become the most military powerful country in the world. Naval aspect already is, as far as I am aware, and industry have just able to just pump out numbers of things. And what we have seen, what have we seen in this war? What is the biggest takeaway lesson from the war in Ukraine? That quantity is a quality of its own. And no country on earth can even go close to the quantity of items that China can push out. There's many reasons for this: huge population, authoritarian government, blah, 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 cheap labor, whatever you want in that. But as far as if we step into a war, oh shit, I don't know. I think people still have their red, white and blue caps on rather than their realism caps. I still believe overall, expeditionary, America has the upper hand over China, but for population, naval capacity, shell capacity, I don't believe so. And I also think about one of the big ones that's left out of this is the psychological aspect, and how would China take massive casualties as compared to how would America take massive casualties if there was a war of the West? How do we view life? How do we view this? So that's something I can touch on more about, maybe almost like the anthropology of warfare in that sort of way. Of course, then on China's side, you can go, well, the one-child policy was in for so long. Could parents not want to send their one child to go? But you've got then a controlled propaganda environment too. It's very, very difficult to see. I don't know. But will we see a war between Russia and China? It's in no one's interest to do it. It's end of the world as we know it, regardless of who would win. You're going to rule over bloody rocks and sticks at the end of it anyway, so it's irrelevant, to be fair. But it will be more the war over the third world, the war over the developing world, the second world, and war over economic. I don't think China want to rule by stick. I think they want to rule by carrot, and they want to get their paws into every economic thing around the world and not have to fire a shot and end up ruling many different areas. Although, as far as imperialist, well, people, you can look at the last couple hundred years and that could be seen as completely incorrect as well compared to other nations. But we will see. But don't underestimate the capacity of the military at all. And when people go, yeah, but the combat experience, walk down to an infantry unit in the West, in NATO, and see who has combat experience there. See who has it. See who has combat experience at all, even against dudes in sandals and flip-flops. But then ask who has conventional warfare experience. The only people on earth with conventional warfare experience, Ukrainians, Russians, and those who have volunteered to go and fight in one of those theatres. As far as conventional warfare, protracted attritional, they're the only ones. Don't care. You're forgetting how long ago the fighting in Afghanistan, the fighting in Iraq was. As far as conventional modern warfare, drones and AD and all of this, it's not there either. It's not on par. It's a scary time. I believe we are one step away, one incident happening to a butterfly effect of complete just demolition of what we know to be the world and the right and wrong and everything there too. So I hope that our world leaders, although I do question the proficiency of many world leaders who are there because they're popular rather than participating in a meritocracy. So again, strap in. But legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. I hope that you have a good weekend, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.